Hey there, and welcome back to my channel where I upload less than once a month because of school, weather and my laziness. And today I'm going to talk about a Pentax K1000 I got a couple of weeks ago, why I like it, why I don't like it, and let's begin with the review. So, Pentax K1000 was in production from 1976 until 1997, and it was a lower budget K-mount SLR. Almost all the features were cut off, only the essential basics are left. Because of that, and because this camera is fully manual, a lot of people love it, and a lot of people say that this was their first camera ever that actually taught them photography. But despite being more than a cheap-end, K1000 is still built like a literal tank. It's super heavy, it's very solid, it's all metal, it feels like it can be used as a self-defense weapon. But I should mention that only earlier Japanese models that have this Asahi logo on the prison plate were actually all metal. The production was later moved to China and Hong Kong, so more plastic was being used as a cost-saving measure. Alright, now it's time to talk about the features of this camera, or actually the lack of them. First of all, there is no self-timer, there is no depth of field preview, there is not a lot of information in the viewfinder, only a needle that moves up and down depending on your scene's brightness, and there is no automatic exposure, and of course also no autofocus. And despite all of that, or maybe even thanks to that, everyone loves Pentax K1000. I bet you've already seen like 10,000 videos that say that this is perfect beginner's SLR, or that this is just a perfect SLR in general. But to me, this is a real reminder that film cameras are just dark boxes that have an opening for light and a lens. And Pentax K1000 is doing great in that department. The shutter is rubberized and shutter speeds range from 1 second to 1/1000th of a second. That's why it's called Pentax K1000. At the start of the video I've already said that the weather in Belgium has been pretty bad over the last couple of weeks, maybe actually last week. It's snowing and it's really cold, so going outside to film a video was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be. I tried. Here is some footage that I managed to film before I realized that it's just not worth it and went home. So instead, here's a little series of pictures from the first roll that I took with this K1000, and enjoy! I hope you liked the pictures. I personally think that they turned out better than I thought they would, and now that I've used this camera for a while, I can finally talk about its pros and cons. And let's begin with pros. First pro is that this camera is very simple to use. You don't need to read any manuals or Google anything, even though I will leave a link for the manual in the description. But it's very easy to figure out how to use it. It's just aperture, focus, shutter speed, and that's it. Then this camera is very solidly built and also reliable. I feel like it will work for another 30 years without a CLA, but it's still better to check any old camera from time to time. Third pro for me is Pentax lenses. There are a ton of different options, not only from Pentax, and I find that K-mount lenses are usually cheaper than, let's say, Olympus OM lenses. Fourth pro is availability. There were 3 million units sold in 20 years, so this camera is easy to find practically anywhere and for really cheap. And the last personal pro is microprism. It's sort of a little circle area in the middle of the viewfinder that turns completely transparent when the object is in focus, so it's sort of focus peaking on digital cameras, but not as cool. First con is related to the last pro. There is no split image focusing, at least on my model. I know it has been added later. I think the last models had both split image focusing and microprism, but my version doesn't have it, so it's a con for me. And then my personal con, there is no auto exposure. Like, I know how to use a fully manual camera, but isn't it just faster to use aperture priority, for example? You just save yourself some time by not having to, in my case, take the phone out of your pocket, unlock it, open the app, point at the subject, press measure, sometimes it doesn't work, and then adjust your shutter speed and or aperture. Then third con is weight and size. It's also a personal con. Like, this camera isn't too heavy, but it's 780 grams, I believe, with this lens, and I have a Pentax ME. It's way smaller and it's just like 550 grams. So I just like small cameras, and this one is pretty big for me. And the last also personal con is loud shutter. Like, this isn't a Pentax 6.7 that causes an earthquake with its shutter, but it's still noticeably louder than, for example, my Pentax ME, and even though it sounds very satisfying to me, it's just not that stealthy. And also, here's a short video of the sounds that this camera makes. I think I'll be making this kind of videos for every camera from now on. So after using a Pentax K1000 for about a month, will I recommend it? I would say yes, but this camera is not for me. I'm just not a fan of all manual cameras that don't offer an automatic exposure option. Other than that, I really enjoyed using it. I think it became one of my favorites, and I'd say it's worth it, especially for its price.